So good morning, everybody. I'm Catherine Megan, I'm CEO at the RIAI, and you're very welcome to this RIAI hosted information session on the new OPW procurement strategies. Just a couple of comments before we start. Procurement is obviously a significant focus of the RIAI's work. We work dealing with, at national level, dealing with government to ensure that the strategies that it employs, the policies that it puts out, are as appropriate as possible. We work with the major capital expenditure government departments, again looking at their strategies, negotiating with them when we see tenders coming out that we believe are not structured in the best way to achieve the best results. And then our practice team work on almost on a daily basis with contracting authorities, where we've had reports from members that the particular conditions or terms of a tender need to be amended. We also have a significant piece of work underway at the moment. The RIAI Procurement Task Force and our council are working on a new procurement policy, which we will be issuing to, obviously, to all members and to the government before the end of the year. And we have been working in the background over the last number of years on training, obviously training for members, but also we carried out a significant amount of training with the Commercial Skills Academy, where we trained over 700 public sector employees on administering the capital management framework. And we are actually just in the process of submitting a tender for the next iteration of that training. And we believe it's been a very successful training in bringing architects, both in the public and private sector, their concerns, their knowledge and experience to those who are not from a technical background but are charged with administering public sector tenders. So, as I say, a very significant area for the Institute. We've just carried out a survey. 55% of practices are currently participating in publicly funded work. At the small scale practices, it's only 31%. So there's a very significant cohort of members who are available if the tender requirements are appropriate. The reasons being cited for not getting involved is that onerous tender requirements, the level of bureaucracy, and a concern that the fee levels are so low that there's a risk that the practices cannot carry out the work at the fees that are being offered for the projects. So lots of work to be done on it, work that the Institute will continue on, but we're really pleased to be able to work with organisations like the OPW and to support their efforts to improve the processes. So before I hand over to our speakers today, just in terms of the housekeeping, my colleagues Ginlong Wang and Teresa Hart are in the background, and Ginlong will be managing the Q&A. So after the presentations, if anybody has questions, if they will put them into the Q&A function, not the chat function, into the Q&A function, and Ginlong will then manage those questions and relay them back to Conor and his colleagues. So just to introduce your three speakers today, the first is Conor Shreenan, who is the State Architect and Principal Architect at the OPW. He is Policy Advisor to Government with respect to architecture and the built environment. And Conor has an advisory role across government departments and to their agencies in support of government priorities and strategies. And he's joined by Cleona Rice, who is a Senior Architect at the OPW, and she's currently working in the OPW property maintenance, focusing on the delivery of programmes of building works and developing construction procurement processes. And the third speaker is Charles Moore. Charles is an architect who heads the property maintenance within the OPW. His role involves overseeing the maintenance programme for over 2,500 state-owned and leased properties and cultural locations throughout Ireland. So I'm now going to hand over to Conor and his colleagues. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Catherine. Can you hear us?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. We're really grateful to the Institute for partnering with us on this morning, and we're very grateful to everyone that's tuned in or those that will listen back. We're going to go through three things. That's going to cover two procurements, one that's live and one that's that we're working on, that will go live over the coming weeks or months. But by way of an overview before we start, I think it's important to say that at the Office of Public Works, we have an incredible team of architects. We've also an incredibly huge remit, mandate, and workload. So we need other architects to work with, and we need architects that are, I guess, equally committed, equally professional, and equally proud in their work. The second thing to say is, and I think you've covered it quite well, Catherine, is the evidence suggests that there is a significant latent additional capacity within the architectural sector to contribute to public work in service of government priorities. And then the third important thing to say in terms of an overview is that we are on, certainly we're on a pathway of incremental innovation. It goes without saying, we're just like you, we won't get everything right, but we are trying. And where we succeed in these areas of innovation, we'll share that with contracting authorities, and not just in the public sphere, but also the private sphere. And where we fail, we'll do the same thing too. Some of the guiding thoughts around procurement that have helped shape the work that we're going to share this morning are, and start with the principle that, excuse me, public procurement and the need for it is sound. It may have lost its way a wee bit, but the principles of fairness and transparency and equality and so on and so forth, we stand by. It is and can be considered a value system of sorts, in that how and what you procure represents your values or organizational values. And I think it's important to say that we're working within existing systems and structures, lest it be interpreted by others that it's not possible to try and tweak and innovate within what we have. No doubt structural reform is on its way from Europe and then to us. But within the system that exists today, our interest is in changing the behaviours that feed the system, as opposed to trying to dismantle the system as it is. To that point, I think it's very important also to acknowledge we haven't cooked up all this work by ourselves. We've done it with trusted advisors from the private sector, both in the procurement space and the legal sphere, and also with the support of colleagues at the Department of Public Expenditure and the Government Construction Contracts Committee, and also colleagues, particularly in the National Built Heritage Services at the Department of Housing and Local Government Heritage. So, and then maybe one thing just to say before we begin, inevitably in procurement, we will upset infinitely more people than we will please. There's only ever one contract at the end of any particular competition. So we're going to go through, three things. We're going to set some context for people. The OPW, as you'll have picked up from, particularly from Charlie's bio, is an incredibly huge organization with a huge mandate. And we want to position these two procurements within many other procurements that are happening on any given day within the organization. We want to walk through the objectives in the first instance that have informed the principles of the two procurements, and then we'll open the floor to a discussion. We'll answer what we can, but we would ask people to be, I guess, conscious that particularly on the first procurement, it is live, so we'll take any question you have, but it may be that in time we need to just regularize that through a common response and through the e-tenders platform. So in terms of the context and in terms of the structure of government, some will be aware, others won't, that the Office of Public Works operates into and out of the Department of Public Expenditure. We are responsible and accountable to the Senior Minister and Minister for State. And then very simply put, the key functions of the OPW are to manage the state portfolio, to present and maintain Ireland's built heritage, and to manage Ireland's flood risk. We do that, or the structure that allows us to do that is at our management board. We're led by John Condon as Secretary General, Chairperson. Catherine White in Corporate Services, Assistant Secretary, Kathleen Morrison, Assistant Secretary in State Management, Robert Mooney, Jim Casey, Head of Engineering and Flood Risk Management, Robert Mooney on Planning and Climate Adaptation, myself as State Architect and Principal Architect, and Rosemary Collier with Heritage Services and Capital Development. So that's how we're structured, and the two procurements that we're going to talk about today are flowing out of State Management and the Office of the State Architect and Principal Architect, broadly gathered under an umbrella term of pilot, which stands for Procurement Innovation Leadership. So to give it some context, before we get into the objectives, in terms of our responsibility to deliver upon government priorities, those priorities are set through the Programme for Government and then the ongoing National Development Plan, recently reviewed and revised. And what we're trying to do within this pilot is take the principles, the objectives and the action areas of the National Policy and Architecture published by colleagues in the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage in 2022, and to drive those actions forward through these two procurements. And as I said, accept that we have existing structures and systems, but to try and change the behaviours that drive those structures and systems. So we're going to talk about two procurements. The first one is a dynamic purchasing system for architectural services regions. So that's coming out of the State Management side of the Management Board. And then the second one is a piece of work in progress, which is a design call framework for architectural services coming out of the Office of the State Architect. So in terms of their objectives and principles, they share some common objectives, and they're quite straightforward and maybe obvious, but to improve project outcomes for ourselves, value for money for the Exchequer, value for money for the general public, and to very clearly set a quality agenda within procurement, which is consistent with government priorities. And those government priorities are the approved National Policy on Architecture, and a particularly focused piece of work which has come out of the Department of Public Expenditure over the summer around accelerating infrastructure and removing barriers to infrastructure delivery. The second objective is to improve our capacity to deliver upon government priorities through the National Development Plan, Programme for Government, by accessing a broader, a more sustainable market. And then the third one is to make more effective uses of our own resources across the organisation, and also those resources that are needed on your side of the table to compete for work through more efficient procurement processes. So, as I say, they sit across both of the procurements. I'm going to run through the principles at a very high level on the dynamic purchasing system in the first instance. In terms of its duration, it'll be an initial period of 5 years with the capacity to extend that annually to a cumulative max of 10 years. So it's quite a long span for a procurement to be always on. And I guess that's an important point we might get to in the discussion. The door is always open, and that's one of the upsides of this particular system. It's structured in 6 lots, so the first 5 of which are regionally or geographically split, and then the 6th, which isn't defined by region, it's more defined by a competence around conservation. Like many other 2-stage procurements, the first stage is retrospective. So how have you responded to the needs of others in the past? And in terms of the submission, the requirements include a European single procurement document, turnover, which ranges, qualification capacity, reference projects, which do not need to be similar to the nature, scale, or complexity of the ask within any one of the mini competitions, and then certain standard self-declarations. The stage 2 process is forward-looking. So in response to what we will publish each time, the question is simply, how will you respond to our needs, which will get met? And submission for the dynamic purchasing system is a blend of price and quality. And the needle on the on that ratio will range from 30 to 100 on price, and then the corresponding piece on quality. But we might talk about why that is in that particular circumstance, and it reflects the incredibly diverse range of straightforward maintenance work through to what could be minor capital projects. So as I said, that procurement is live, and we'd encourage people to ask what questions they might have now, but also to engage directly via e-tenders. And then the second procurement we want to talk about, which is a work in progress, is a two-stage restricted framework with some, I guess, we think distinct characteristics. So it will have, and this is a work in progress and may be subject to change, but it will have a duration of 4 years. It will also be split by lots, really simply put, small, medium, large capital projects. Similarly, at stage 1, it will be retrospective, a slightly different ask. We will need this European single procurement document completed, and we will ask for reference projects. Again, they needn't be directly related to the specific ask or the initial contract, but the opportunity is given to bidders for you to explain how what you've done responds to the complexities of what we're likely to need. And again, certain self-declarations. And stage 2 is also prospective and forward-looking, and it will be in response to a brief and a need that we defined within each lot. When we have a need, we will pull 3 tenders randomly, and we'll ensure that sequential calls won't select the same tender twice until the cycle is completely exhausted itself. And then the submission in this instance will comprise a motivation statement along with methodology and capacity and a design response. So I guess the distinction within this one is that we're not using turnover as a measure of ability, nor are we asking for a price submission. In stage 2, we will make a fee offer based on a lot of the evidence and data that we have set up to form a reasonable fee offer. That's how they sit together. And I think that's pretty much it. We're happy, Catherine and Jean Long, to open the floor to questions if people have any, or for Charlie or Tina to jump in with anything else.
Thank you very much, Connor. That was really good to be able to hear from you on kind of where the OPW is kind of coming from, and to just get that better understanding around the tendering process. Just before we dive into the Q&A segment, and I see lots of questions coming in now, which is great. I wanted to run a quick live poll for participants, and just to get a better understanding of where everyone is coming from, what challenges everyone is experiencing, and to help us identify future training opportunities around public procurement. So I'm going to launch the live poll now. And everyone should see a window pop up on their screen, and I'd be very grateful for everyone that completes the questionnaire because it really does give us important information to help guide future training and discussions in this area. So your feedback is really appreciated. So the live poll is running now in the background. Just to give you a sense of the questions, question 1 is, which of the following best describes your practice, and looks at kind of the size of practice members are kind of working in. On question 2, how would you describe your experience with public sector procurement? So from no experience to extensive experience. And Question 3, in which OPW regions do you primarily operate or intend to tender? So it looks at the lots in this case. And for question 4, does your practice currently include a conservation accredited architect? I think that's a particular reference to lot 6. For question 5, what is your greatest challenge in engaging with public procurement opportunities? So this is a kind of a broader question around that. So is it the e-tender part, the technological part, resourcing, and some other options there for members to choose? And if none of the responses kind of explain where you're experiencing greatest challenges, please do email us in. And I will share my email address in the chat function shortly, just so we can better understand and capture your feedback on that. For question 6, which area would you most value further training in? That's particularly of interest to ourselves in the education team. So is it on kind of preparing tender submissions? Is it around digital processes or understanding procurement procedures kind of more clearly, whether it be frameworks or the DPS? And finally, last question, how confident do you feel about preparing and submitting a DPS application for architectural services after today's session? So really appreciate everyone's responses. We have 180 responses so far and climbing fast. This data will be really useful to us. So I might just leave the poll running in the background and move on to some of the questions, if that's okay, Connor.
Yeah, let's do that.
Perfect. The first question here, are small practices excluded from public procurements? I think, is it because they don't have enough experience in such works, or I suppose, what would be your view in terms of those thresholds for kind of requirements for tendering?
Well, I can only speak from our own perspective, and the answer is no. So we're setting both of these with a quality agenda that is very open to, if a practice feels it's too small, to joint venture with somebody else or to put it up with somebody else. So that's precisely one of the barriers we're trying to remove. I don't know if that answers that question.
Yep, no, that's great. And we have a second question here, Connor, which I'm going to maybe just try and kind of simplify a little bit. So a participant asked about the difference between how the state sets minimum salary scales for public employees versus while public procurement for professional services may at times prioritize lowest price. Do you think there is a scope for minimum fee standards in public tenders for professional services? Do you have a view on that, or is that something you came across, Connor?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, all I can say is the second procurement that we're working on sets the fee. We're not asking for people to bid on fee. So that is an example of a public contracting authority trying to get in front of that. I'm not entirely sure I understand the question around salaries and salary scales, but yeah.
Yeah, if it's quite a yeah. There's a lot of information in that question. Whoever submitted it, if you'd like to follow up with another question, that might be helpful. And Patrick asks, in what region does the Midlands sit in the lots for dynamic purchasing?
Yeah, I can take that one. So there are 5 regional lots. So the Midlands, I suppose there are various different lots that you could consider. that span the Midlands. They're all set out on page 3 of the request for tender. But we'll say if we take, for example, the Northeast, for example, that would be Kildare, Meath, Louth, Monaghan, and part of Cavan and Westmeath. Then you could also consider there's Dublin as its own particular lot. And then there's also the West and Northwest. So I think if you refer to the request for tender document, that sets out all the geographic areas. So you could apply to more than one, for example, if you were on board.
That's very good. And actually, just as a nice segue, thank you, Cliona, in terms of applying to more than one kind of lots. Another question is asking for if a practice applies for more than one lot, can the same design team be put forward for each, or is it expected that separate teams, for example, different CVs, are proposed for each lot?
No, you could use the same design team. There is a limit on the amount of lots, so we're saying that you can tender for 2 of the geographic lots and the conservation lot. So that would be 3 in total if you're tendering for the conservation lot.
Perfect. And will reference projects need to be fully completed buildings, or can ongoing projects be included as part of the portfolio alongside completed work?
It needs to be complete. Yeah.
Pardon?
Sorry, the projects need to be complete.
Completed. Okay, perfect. And will indicative project budgets be available for each project?
Yeah, I would have thought that in the stage 2, we'll be providing a scope, and that would include, normally we'd have an order of magnitude kind of understanding of a range probably at the very outset. We'd have an idea of roughly the value of the job.
That's super. Thank you, Charles.
That's obviously subject to, design development, and that'll evolve, but we would have a feel for it at the beginning.
Yeah, okay. Very good. And Joan asks, does the OPW procure full multidisciplinary teams under the DPS, or architects appointed separately with other consultants procured through separate process?
Yeah, correct. So both of these procurements are for architectural services. So we look after the disciplines.
So separately, is it?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And just a question in from Pat on lot 6 for the grade 1 and grade 2 conservation architects. The criteria require experience in 3 conservation projects, including at least 1 on a government contract. How will the OPW assess applicants who have extensive experience in both conservation work and government contracts, but not perhaps specifically conservation projects within a government contract?
Yeah, so I'm just reading Pat's question there. I don't look in the first instance. I don't think you're excluded. Like, it is possible for you to, as we've suggested in the earlier answers, to join up with somebody who can meet the criteria. But Tina or Charlie, I don't know. Do you want to?
Yeah, well, we laboured over this quite a bit in that, from a conservation point of view, lots 1 to 5, there's an assumption, that people can have, be it grade 3 or grade 2. The 6th lot that materialised was, I suppose, designed around very specific conservation-heavy projects. So, I mean, I don't know if we'll be using it that heavily. I would imagine most of the work will happen through lot 1 and 5. But if we had a particularly sensitive, national monument or something that we were doing some work on, that's where we'd be leaning into lot 6, I think. So, is the question specifically around how do I qualify for lot 6?
Yeah, I think that that'd be a helpful kind of.
Gillian, I think I understand Pat's question. So the quick and short answer is that Pat's fully entitled to buddy up or partner up with somebody who can meet that criteria. But just to follow on from Charlie's response, I'd encourage Pat to raise that query through e-tenders.
Oh, that's really helpful. Thank you, Connor. So that's kind of a pass-fail kind of scenario, is it?
It is, yeah, it's criteria. Yeah.
So another question is on just regarding quality, and how does the OPW ensure quality and maintained under the DPS procurement route? And I suppose avoiding a kind of as the expression goes, race to the bottom regarding fees. Is that something that you had a chance to think about?
Yeah, so as we went through the DPS at the second stage, so the award criteria is a blend of price and quality. And there may be circumstances, given the nature of the work, from maintenance through to minor capital works, where they call maybe price only. And I guess so when quality is sought, that's how we control quality outcomes. When price only is sought, we will assess whether the bids that come in are anywhere near abnormally low, and if they are, we won't accept them. It's the nature of the incredibly broad work within the regions. That's the reason why that piece is quality and price.
Oh, yeah, that's very clear, Connor. And I suppose one the other advantage with DPS is kind of it provides in principle more access to the tender.
Yeah, it does, yeah. And sorry, it's a good point. And just back to Pat McSweeney's question, in its biggest version, the DPS will be in existence for 10 years. It's always on. So, you know, should Pat choose not to partner up with somebody, but should he have over the coming years experience that he doesn't have today, the system's open to accept membership at all times, if that makes sense. So it's not that the closing date.
Can I make a point about the DPS sort of philosophically? Because we had a framework up until the end of last year, and you know, we had a lot of it went relatively well, but there were lessons learned. And you know, one of the benefits of a framework is that you're dealing with the same people all the time, and you can build a relationship and a rapport. But the drawback to that is that it's a closed shop for a period of time. So back to Connor's point around it being open all the time, I think like we're keen to engage and broaden the gene pool really in terms of who we're dealing with. And you know, with these jobs, the more modest work, we'll say, might be more appealing to people who haven't done a tremendous amount of public work or worked with us before. And you know, it gives the opportunity to grow into it. So yeah, that's why, I mean, the DPS has its strengths and weaknesses, but and we're going in with an open mind. Like all the quality stuff, I mean, there is a risk that from a client point of view that, you know, we might not always get the service we're looking for. But we are sort of showing a vulnerability there in that we're opening our doors to as many people as possible and try and get, you know, engage and collaborate with people who are interested in doing public work. But that, you know, as Connor said at the outset as well, there's you know, like it's a pilot, so we know that we won't always get the A grade in terms of our side of it, and we know that there will be some sort of sketchy patches along the way, but that's the nature of trying to be innovative. You have to be willing to make a few mistakes, and it's an unforgiving space really in the public domain at the moment, but we're doing our best to open that up.
Can I add that there's an initial application submission date for the DPS, which is the 13th of October. And then the DPS will close for a few weeks while those applications are reviewed and while successful applicants sign the DPS agreement. So that will take a number of weeks. Then the DPS will open up again for its entire lifetime for new submissions. So people can apply at any time through the lifetime, and also if they are unsuccessful at one point they can apply again. So it's in trying to create a procurement mechanism that is as inclusive as possible for architects to join.
Yeah, I think that's really encouraging to hear. And I think it comes across in this discussion, certainly. Just on that note, Peter asks how many candidates will be included in the DPF, or I suppose, is there a cap or?
No cap.
Okay. And Brian asks a question just regarding new or young architectural practices. Do you have any tips or suggestions for younger architects, newer practices to kind of begin thinking about public procurement and kind of access, pitching for public works?
No, not necessarily tips. I mean, I think it's important to say that our focus in these procurements is quality. And so what we're trying to do is be very open to where that quality might come from, whether it's new, old, young, small, big. But the evidence suggests that 70% of small, potentially young, some practices are not engaging for one reason or another. So I think Brian's question is, what consideration is there for new young architectural practices in either of the procurement options? So hopefully that answers that question. I don't want the issue to get confused. It's around quality as opposed to anything else. So where that quality comes from will vary. Does that make sense, Gabriel?
Yep. It is. There is another question here on just with regards to safe passes, and is it an absolute requirement for all staff to hold a valid safe pass at the time of the initial DPS submission, or can that be something that the staff acquire before project commencement?
Thanks.
In terms of if you read through the request for tenders, in terms of most of those requirements, like safe pass, which I'm not sure is mentioned specifically actually, and insurance, the condition is generally that it is in place prior to the award of the contract at stage 2. So that's my understanding of that, but we can definitely follow up on e-tenders with a clarification.
Thank you. And is it just on that safe pass, is that something that you found to be is it something that is a priority for yourselves, or is that something that's coming more from the contractor side?
Yeah, it is something that comes up a lot with contractors, I think, to get on site. Yeah.
Okay. And when kind of thinking about this DPS model, did you have anything that you were able to kind of reference or benchmark against, or was it that kind of evolution from the previous frameworks to this model?
I'll name check. We had a brilliant consultant, Peter Brennan, who brought a tremendous amount of experience with him. We kind of developed this idea on the back of that framework that we had that ran for 4 years. And as I say, we're pretty happy with it. But there were obviously opportunities that came about with the DPS that we were interested in exploring around being a little bit more innovative. I think this is the first DPS we've done for consultants in OPW, but it's coming with quite a bit of experience from people who helped us put it together.
Great. Thank you. And what was his name again? Sorry.
Peter Brennan.
Peter Brennan. Great.
Yeah.
Just make a note here. Just with regards, just kind of circling back to the to lot 6 and conservation, but really all of the lots. As an architect with accreditation at grade 3, can you participate in this process?
So in terms, so an architect of grade 3, yes, they can apply for lots 1 to 5. But specifically for lot 6, the conservation lot, we have a requirement for grade 2 and grade 1 RIAI conservation accredited architects.
And
Very
perhaps
good.
that's a nice little prompt from the RIAI to get, because we talked about this during the week, about you know, more people getting involved in taking a run at the grade 2 and the grade 1. So it's maybe you know, a call to arms.
Very good. Just so there's a question from Mihal, and he just wanted to say that this is a really interesting approach. Many thanks. The design call framework, Connor mentioned making a price offer. Is that a fee offer from the OPW?
Yes, it is. Yeah. So we will not be seeking bids or prices at stage 2. Yeah.
Brilliant. And Joan was asking about PI and what PI requirements are there for the various options, levels and excess, opinion on restrictions, fire.
It's set out at 1.5 million per annum, but that's a maximum that is required. So it may actually be lower than that. And the requirement, specific requirements will be set out at stage 2, the mini competition stage.
Very good. And are architects required to submit six different tender submissions, potentially for one one for each lot, or can these submissions be grouped together?
That question is a wee bit confusing. Like, each tender is a tender that needs to be responded to. So,
well, we have capped it at 2 lots as a maximum for any practitioner to bid, plus the conservation.
Yeah, and it could be, for example, if you take the regional, if you're bidding for 2 regional lots, yes, like it could be the same submission that you submit. But I would imagine that your submission for lot 6 would need to be specific to lot 6 because it's conservation focused.
Okay, very good. And just looking here through, there's a lot of questions coming through. We might just pick up.
There's a question there from Aisling Rusk around Weaver Conservation Registrant certification. Is that?
Yeah, and we've actually had a query already on this through the e-tenders portal, which we responded to. So it's the I can't remember the exact terminology, but it's the conservation. There are 2 grades. Does anybody know the name of them off the top of their head?
I don't.
Yeah, so that is clarified on e-tenders.
Okay, perfect. So we can.
There are 2 conservation grades from the equivalents from the RIAI that are accepted.
Very good. And will there be specialist services required as well as architectural services that can be subcontracted maybe?
We would have occasion at the stage 2, like if we think it's necessary to seek something in addition, you know, a specialism. It would be relatively unusual, but it you know, we do have cause sometimes to bring in, you know, I'm trying to think now if there's something specific around landscape or something like that, you know, if there's a particular specialism that comes with the project. But we'd describe that in the stage 2 kind of competition.
Very good. And just with regards to PSDP then, there's a question here from a participant, and he noticed that it's stipulated that the practice must act as PSDP on a number of projects, and is this something that can be outsourced, I suppose?
If we, like, again, in the stage 2 criteria, if we're seeking PSDP to be rolled into the service, we'll seek it in that, you know, in the competition. So I would imagine one could bring a PSDP with you in your bid for the work, or provide PSDP services yourself as the bidder. But that would be in the competition.
Yeah, there is a requirement at stage 1 in order to get on the DPS that the architect would have acted as PSDP on one of the reference projects that they submit.
Very good. And yep.
Do you mind if I interrupt? There's an inordinate amount of questions coming from one anonymous attendee. We'll answer any questions we want, but I think in the interest of balance, there's a couple of questions that are quite important to get to. I think Jamie Whelan's got a question about, could you note some examples of the types of projects that will be opened to tender for in the two segments? And I'm assuming he means the two procurements. And I think that's probably important to talk about. So the first one, the DPS, the works on page 19 of the document, the works are tabulated. So in three categories: maintenance, refurbishment, and capital. And on the maintenance side, it's planned maintenance works, such as repairs or refurbishment of roofs, windows, or other building elements. So there's quite a lot of that, given what Charlie has mentioned, the incredible scale of the portfolio. On refurbishment, it's refurbishment and conservation works to existing buildings, including historic buildings and protected structures, energy upgrades, retrofits to existing buildings to meet contemporary standards and statutory requirements. And on the capital, it's reconfigurations, fit outs, building extensions, temporary accommodation, and on occasion, new builds. So that'll give you a flavour on the DPS, hopefully, and on the on the design framework. The small, medium, large capital projects tend to be, and I don't know, it's a work in progress, but they could tend to be anything from, they may also include conservation, predominantly on balance, probably new build, but possibly not, but ranging anywhere from, you know, at the smaller end of the scale, 5, 10, 15 million euro worth of capital work through to 20, 30, 40 and upwards. So significant work over the lifespan, we hope. I hope that answers Jamie's question. Sorry to jump in, Ginland. I just wanted to make sure that there's a bit of balance given where the clock is at.
No, that's great. That's really appreciated, Conor. And just while you're looking through some of the other questions there, can a sole practitioner participate?
Yes.
Okay.
Three
Yeah.
CVs, haven't we?
So 3 CVs have been requested, but there's a nuance there that the sole practitioner would be able to get access to additional technical staff as required. So in the Dublin region, there's a stipulation for 3 technical staff, a minimum of 1 to be an RIAI registered architect, and then the regions, there's a requirement for 1 RIAI registered architect, and then an ability to have access to another 2 technical staff when required.
Very good. Thank you.
And
yep.
Conor McGowan's got a great question there.
See the perspective of a solo practitioner. Yeah. I think it's great to hear all that was said. So just reading out the question: as a solo operator, life is overwhelming, and I'm going to do my first tender now after a decade or so in practice. I think the thing I'd like to express is how unquantifiable it all is to me. There are unknown unknowns, and a point of contact in the OPW or a workshop to go through a bad first tender application would be really useful. Like if someone would go through my tender and sit me down and tell me my mistakes. That sounds like that sounds really like a really good suggestion. Conor, do you have any thoughts on that?
I thought it was important to draw attention to this question because this is possibly some of the underlying issue behind 70% of small practices not operating in public spheres. Like part of what we're doing today is to try and get in front of some of these issues and put faces to the procurement and be clear on what we're trying to achieve, why we're doing it, how we're doing it, where it's all headed. We're not in a position, like, I mean, I can say now we're not in a position to sit with individuals and go through their tenders. But I might, Ginland, suggest that might be something that the great work that the RIAI is doing, that they might consider doing. There's a whole myriad of reasons as to why we can't, myself, Charlie, Tina, sit down with an individual and go through the tender. But it sounds like there's an opportunity for the institute.
Can I just say that is the beauty of the DPS, because if Connor puts in an application and it's unsuccessful, you'll get some feedback, and you can go again. So there is an element of engagement there. I mean, as Connor says, we're pretty busy, but yeah.
Very good.
Good on, if you're okay with this dynamic questioning or answering thing. Gavin Smith's got a great question. I think it'd be useful to clarify with everyone.
Yeah. So Gavin is asking, what is the anticipated procedure for call-offs from the DPS? Will a maximum number of architects be invited to tender for individual projects? If so, will this be a random selection as per the design call framework?
Okay, so the answer is no, it won't be random. All of the members within each of the lots will be asked to tender on DPS. And Ronan McCann's question is quite important too.
Yeah. So and Ronan asks, and we might just use this as the last question. There are so many questions coming in, Connor, and really appreciate everyone's time. But what I might do is just share with you all of the questions, and if there's anything maybe for e-tender that can be responded by e-tender, then that might help answer some other questions as well for everyone. But Ronan was asking, we have previous experience of successfully gaining admission to an OPW framework lot after coming through 2 intensive rounds of submissions. However, no project was ever tendered to it. Can the panel provide any guarantee that work will be tendered to the established lots?
Yeah, so 2 points on that. Part, hopefully, of what we're getting across today is that we're trying to take the intensity and the burden out of the submission processes. And then to the second question, no, we can't. We can't give anybody any guarantee that work will be tendered. But all I can say is that neither Cliona nor Charlie or I or any of the rest of the team have any interest in work not happening or work stalling or work stopping. So there's a huge amount of work in the background to try and generate some confidence as opposed to certainty, which we unfortunately can't provide.
And could I just maybe finish up with one last question on that note, because I'm really mindful of the amount of time and kind of resources that members put into applying for the tenders. But I was just wondering, is there putting together this tendering process from your end, does that take a lot of time and effort and how because it's just the question came to me because I suppose you're probably unlikely to put in all this time and effort if there isn't a demand there for it, if there isn't work there to kind of that needs to be kind of
our incentive. Yeah, our incentive is to I guess broaden the market and access the capacity that we talked about that we feel is there and that you've evidenced is there. But our incentive is also that we spend less time in paperwork and more time trying to solve the problems of government priorities with great architects.
I add something on that. In terms of the DPS, it is definitely less onerous for an architect to apply to get on the DPS than a framework. So hope that's encouraging in terms of people applying.
I might just throw a few figures. I mean, as Connor said, there's no guarantee. We're not obliged to guarantee anyone any work on the back of this, but we have something like 700 or 800 projects sort of live in the regions per annum. So we're heavily reliant on, consultants and the support that we get. So there's a healthy amount of work there. It's all on the back of government priorities and all that, and funding, etc. But you know, the current picture is very healthy. There should be a lot of work advertised through this framework nationwide. And if anything, we'd be probably a little bit nervous about perhaps potentially having a deluge of applications that we'll have to evaluate, which will take time. But that's the nature of the DPS. There's an element of experimentation with this. We don't know what level of uptake we'll get, but and that's why we're kind of saying to our audience here today as well, bear with us. If we do put up a competition and there's a lot of interest, it'll take a while for us to evaluate, and we have to dot our I's and cross our T's and all the rest of it. So bear with us.
Very good. So maybe just before we wrap it up, I might just share quickly with you, with everyone, the results of the poll if you're interested, just to see them very quickly. Now I'll just try and share my screen here, and hopefully you can see that. Is that coming across?
Yeah, we can see it.
Yeah.
Perfect. So just regarding which of the following best describes your practice. So we have kind of a range of practices here, but I suppose, yeah, so just kind of an even spread there. On question 2, how would you describe your experience with public sector procurement? And just considerable experience. I think that's the nature of today's talk, probably. But still a 16% of members today that don't necessarily have previous experience and are interested in this space. For question 3, in which OPW regions do you primarily operate or intend to tender? So there's kind of just if we take Dublin out, there's kind of quite an even spread there. And on question 4, does your practice currently include a conservation accredited architect? And yeah, so amongst our members here with us today, there's quite there are some very experienced conservation accredited practitioners. And on question 5, what is your greatest challenge in engaging with public procurement opportunities? So meeting the eligibility and compliance requirements seems to be kind of a high one, or and kind of issues around pricing and navigating the e-tenders portal. So that's something for us to think about as well. and if there's anything we can help with there going forward. And on question 6, which area would you most value further training on? So we have preparing quality-based submissions has been identified as kind of the key area, as well as understanding procurement procedures better, and pricing, resourcing, and contracts. So finally, how confident do you feel about preparing and submitting a DPS application for architectural services after today's sessions? So yeah, so there's a kind of a range of kind of confidence levels there, and hopefully the Q&A session was helpful to this end. So I'll just stop sharing my screen.
Again, if I can just jump in, because one, like I suppose my big takeaway there, and we touched on it around the DPS and whether it's a vehicle to interfere with pricing and that. And back to Connor's point that like we're looking for quality, and we're conscious you get what you pay for. We're spending public money, and we have to be very cognizant of that. We're definitely not looking to like it's not a race to the bottom here. That's why the pendulum, or the dial, as you call it, we have the opportunity on a project by project basis to, you know, build an evaluation around what we think is necessary. So if a job is very straightforward, we'll probably go price only. But if we have something specific we're looking for, that's where we're leaning into the quality. So it gives us as a client an opportunity to put a bit of judgment around how we put a competition together. So I don't want anyone to leave the room thinking that the OPW is trying to push down architects' prices or you know, fees or that. It's definitely not a motivation for us. We just want a quality return and to engage with like-minded people that are keen to do public work. and do it well.
That's super. I think that's a really nice note to wrap up on, if that's okay. And I just wanted to thank Connor, Cliona, and Charles for your time today, for the presentation, for answering so many questions, and to thank everyone that was able to join us today. The session will be recorded and made available probably on our YouTube channel. Just to mention again that all of the questions, and there are so many questions that have come in, over 100. I will we'll kind of share these questions with yourselves and the OPW, and maybe just keep an eye out on the eTender portal for any responses that come through, even to other questions. I hope you enjoyed it and found it useful, and a lot of food for thought there, even for ourselves, I suppose, to help us identify additional training around this. So if you had any other or final remarks, Connor, Cliona, and Charles.
No, other than to thank everyone that's tuned in and yourselves at the RIAI. We're very grateful for the opportunity.
Great. Thank you very much. And we might wrap it up here. So thank you.